Hey friends, it is me, Bobby B, with the Tilt and Shift Photography Business Podcast. I'm back, obviously. I like to state the obvious sometimes. It really roots me in reality. I've had some doses of reality recently, all good ones, but I wanted to share a few with you. I just got back from Doc Day. It's a one-day conference in Dublin, and I've been wanting to go to this conference for a while. It's been around for 6 or 7 years, I think. It's run by Kevin and Annie Kafash. They are from Dublin. They're photographers from Dublin. And they choose a bunch of speakers, and we all sit in it's actually a venue, like a music venue. And I thought it was interesting because there's 2 levels. And so you sit on the floor and you sit up above, like in the mezzanine, and they've got these like wires around it. So it kind of looks like a wrestling ring, which I really loved. If you ever watched wrestling in like the 80s and the 90s, I guess it's maybe still like that now. But they used to have these like cage matches, and it just reminded me of that. It's nothing like that, but I thought it was hilarious that that's what my brain thought. But obviously it's a music venue, and sometimes people get rowdy. So you could tell that the room had seen some action. And I'm talking about this because it was just really cool. Because normally I go to conferences and they're in like these sterile conference rooms or like ballrooms of hotels, and the environment in which you experience inspiration is really important. And I haven't been to a conference for a long time because of stuff like that. Like, conferences were all sort of feeling the same. People would get up there and talk about how they became the photographer they are. And I think when you're early in your career, those things can be they can give you direction and they can be really inspiring, but it got to a place where that just wasn't the right fit for me. But I wanted to go to Doc Day because it seemed different. It seemed more intimate. It seemed more story-driven. The photographers that they were asking to be there seemed like people that I liked, that I could identify with, whereas previous other conferences, I wasn't getting that connection from the speakers. And that's just me personally, but that's why I stopped going to conferences. Anyways, I went to this one, and it was really cool because the last time I went to a conference, I was in a very different place in my career. I was doubting myself. I was doubting my artistry. I was over people that I thought that I wanted to be rather than accepting who I was. And I was really kind of like this dog paddling energy. And so being in that conference space was and that's pretty normal, right? Like, we want people to tell us what to do, right? Like, if someone would just tell me what to do, I don't have to make this decision for myself. So when you're young or when you're new in the business, asking other people for their opinions and for their approval is pretty normal. Like, you haven't quite figured out that, you know what? This is all about you. You get to make these decisions. There is no right or wrong. But hearing that there's no right or wrong when you're young and inexperienced is hard, because at that point in your life, at least I was used to being taught, and I was used to being told what to do. And there's a lack of responsibility there, which is nice. Like, if I don't have to take responsibility for this, hell yes, like, just tell me what to do and I'll get it done. For me, it also came from a place of being an athlete, and your coaches just told you what to do and you did it, and so it was easier to sort of like farm out that trust rather than trusting yourself. But as you get older, my friends, that self-trust, that confidence, that self-efficacy, the belief, the evidence that you have in your own skills and perspective, they become more and more and more and more important and more truthful. And that's how you become more authentic. There's so much talk about authenticity now. And I think part of what's missing out of that conversation is that of experience. When we're younger or when we're new in a career, we're really trying on a whole bunch of different things. We're we're trying out different styles. We're very few people come into any artistic pursuit or work knowing exactly who they are and what they're doing. And I think that's really what art is figuring out who the hell you are. All of this to say that my last conference, I was in that place where I was really trying to figure out who I was, and I was looking to other people for answers. So I showed up at Doc Day, not being in that headspace, not really knowing where I was going to fit, because one, I went there by myself, and two, I didn't know anybody there, and that was also another thing. I've never gone to a conference by myself before. This is also another thing that you start doing in your middle age, my friends. It's pretty great doing things by yourself, and not having to listen to anybody else's schedule and just like doing whatever the hell you want. So I show up in Dublin, and I'm immediately taken in. And what I mean by that is people were just nice. There was a very intimate atmosphere because everyone is so welcoming. It really felt like a giant hug. Truthfully, I mean, we all showed up the day before because they do these photo walks through Dublin. There's a bunch of different leaders. Some of them are the speakers the following day. And you just walk around Dublin for a few hours. And then in the evening, a bunch of people had submitted a photo, and you could just come up and say what this photo meant to you. There was no discussion about method. There was only product. There was only the outcome, which was really refreshing, just to, rather than people being like, oh, I use this camera and this is what I do with this and this is the lens I have. I didn't hear anybody ask those questions, which is very refreshing, because if you stop asking those questions, it means you're thinking about the product rather than trying to replicate something that someone else has done. So if you love someone's work and you find out the gear that they use and you use the same gear, you're not working towards your own vision. You're working to make your work look like someone else's. So if that's what you're currently doing and you haven't recognized that that's the space that you're in, my encouragement would be to use something different. Even though you love this person's work, try not to use the same gear that they're using. That's a big learning curve, is realizing that if you're consistently trying to make work the way other people make work, that's the longer it will take you to figure out what your voice actually is. And of course, it's always helpful to know what people use, because sure, you like that and maybe you want to emulate that in some way, but emulation and copying it's really easy to trip from one into the other, especially when you're earlier in your career, or if you haven't done the work to figure out what really makes you tick and to be really confident in that and really consciously pursue that which makes you feel fiery, feel interested, feel curious. If you're not feeling those things and you're just trying to make something look a certain way because you've seen someone else do it, that's not your voice, that's not your vision, that's not your perspective. That's you being safe and hoping that if you can make work like someone that you admire, then you will also be admired, or you will also have the things that you think that person has, like prestige or money or a successful business or whatever that is. Being really honest with yourself as to why you're trying to emulate / copy someone else is a huge step in your artistic journey and in your business to figure out why it is you actually have a camera in your hand. And I promise you feel compelled to pick up a camera because you do have something to say. And there is a certain way that you will say it. But recognizing when you're copying what other people are doing is a really big step in your artistic journey to understand that voice that you actually have is hidden beneath what you're trying to copy. I want to share with you a few little morsels of insight that some of these speakers at Doc Day shared. And the reason I want to share this with you is because I think they're really important messages. And I'm going to, of course, credit the people that said this, because their message is one that can get us through a lot of the doldrums. I'm hearing from across the spectrum that inquiries are down for a lot of people. So maybe you're feeling a little bit lost or a little bit scared or a little bit wayward or wondering, or any of those kind of unsettling feelings that we can have in midwinter. So today I'm going to share some morsels of goodness that these speakers shared at Doc Day. And if you feel compelled about any of this, if you like the idea of walking into a room of photographers that feels like a hug, then Doc Day is happening next year in February. Tickets are on sale. I really, really encourage you to go because it was a really wonderful experience. Kevin and Annie Kafash They are Dublin photographers. They started this thing. I mentioned this, and they went up first. And they spoke about many of the things that their clients shared with him. Because one of the things that we tend to get really tripped up on, especially in the documentary world, is awards and accolades. There's lots of awards programs specifically for documentary photographers. And like I mentioned before, things being right and wrong, documentary definitely has this like bend towards things being right or wrong, or like good or bad, and that they should be done in a certain way. And so Kevin and Annie's talk was a really wonderful way to start off the conference because they acknowledged that they were in a room of really talented photographers, and they swung that over to the perspective of their clients. And they said a few simple truths is what they talked about, but the one that really spoke out to me was one of the first things that they said, and that was to remember who these photos are for. These photos are for these people and the people who love them. And I know that we know that. And I also see a lot of photos that get awarded that have really nothing to do with the client or the people who love them. They're more gestures towards the skills and the ego of the photographer. And I know that might rub some people the wrong way. And especially as someone who I've won many dozens of awards in all of the major competitions, and I still feel compelled to apply. So I'm speaking from knowledge in this, and like as trying to be like realistic and humble about this. Like, yeah, awards are, I don't know, sometimes we just feel like you have to have them. But I do see a lot of photographers, and there's sometimes a message going around that we really have to like shoot for us, not necessarily do what the clients want us to do. And I do agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I see a lot of photographers take it too far. One of the speakers later on in the day, Matt Badenoch, he said one of his quotes, he was talking about street photography, but one of his quotes was, "Don't be a dick." We can tend to be, as artists, we do have to stick to our style and to our vision. And we can also say yes to our clients if they want something. This is definitely a gentle balance. Like, if you are showing work that you don't want to create, you are going to attract clients for that work. And then there's going to be a rub because you don't want to create that work. These clients expect you to make that work because that's what you're showing. And if you are attracting clients who, if you're marketing yourself truthfully and authentically, genuinely, you're showing the work that you want to create, and people hire you because you have truthfully presented yourself, they may still ask you to make a photo that you don't want to make or that you wouldn't feel compelled to make. And my encouragement is just to do it. Just say yes and do it. Jay Doherty was another speaker at the end of the conference, and that was the kind of one of the main things that he really drove home in his talk, was to just say yes. Like, or he at least just says yes. Yes, we can do whatever you want. That's fine. And I think his work really speaks to that. His work looks like he can do whatever, wherever, for whomever, like he really relishes that with his clients, that which they want, and he provides that because he wants that too. So the rub here is when what you want is not what your clients want. So at the end of the day, we really do have to remember who these photos are for, and these photos are for our people and the people who love them. So if you believe that and you present that in your work, you are going to bring people to you who feel the same way. And so that you won't be you won't need to make images that don't feel aligned for you. So my thought here is to encourage you to really understand that what you are presenting is what your clients will want when they hire you. And there may be times when they're going to ask you to do something because some of the people at the wedding are not the people who hired you, like parents or aunts. Like, it's okay to make a photo of an aunt who is asking you just to take a picture of her and her nephew. Like, I've seen photographers resist that. We are so privileged. We are so lucky. We get to spend a whole day making beautiful images with people, like experiencing a once in a lifetime moment with the people they love. Like, this is a pretty good job that we have. If we're not willing to acknowledge that these photos are for them and we're making them for them and that we can bend and collaborate on photos with them, then you might be in the wrong profession. I think that again, this isn't an issue if you are honest in your marketing. It becomes an issue if you are choosing clients who don't feel aligned, or if clients are choosing you who don't feel aligned. And those red flags usually pop up in the discovery call, in maybe you have a questionnaire. My encouragement to you would be to actually talk with people who are hiring you rather than sending them a questionnaire and just doing everything online, because you're much more likely to run into these rubs, these lack of vision or a dissonant vision with your clients if you haven't had these discussions. So that's it. Remember who these photos are for, because if your clients are hiring you for you, then the clients are going to be for them and for you, because you're going to be making photos that they really enjoy. If you haven't been honest in your marketing, you're not going to make photos that you enjoy, and your clients are going to have expectations that you don't want to meet. Okay, the next speaker that I'm going to talk about, her name is Janina Brocklesby, and she was on the Tilt and Shift podcast a few episodes ago. I published her episode in November, I think. I think it's episode 61. I should have looked at that up before, but just scroll back a little bit. She's wonderful. And she said something that I think is really easy to forget. And it is something that kind of applies to whatever we do. Because life is friggin' short, my friends. I am like on the pipeline to 50. I never thought that I would get to this point in my life. Part of it is because we as a society don't talk about aging, and we talk about, live in the moment, like life goes so fast. Like, it really does. We're not kidding. And it's really easy to get caught up if you're super busy. It's really easy to get caught up in just like rushing through a wedding day, not being present. Being present is so friggin' important for what we're doing here, because what Janina said, she said, shoot each wedding like it's your last wedding, because for them it is. And that really hit me. It really hit me, because if I've been doing this for 15 years, I've shot hundreds and hundreds of weddings, and there are many of them I did not shoot like it was my last wedding because I had another one the next day, or I knew I was exhausted and it was coming up in the next week. So this little reminder is applicable to our entire lives throughout, like, do everything like it's your last, because you really don't know. You don't know. Like, I could record this and I could walk out on the street and get hit by a car. It's very true, but we just don't acknowledge that. I mean, we think about it, but like, we don't really acknowledge it, which, I mean, if we had to acknowledge that constantly all the time, our brains would just sort of melt. But I'm not sure if that's totally true. I think we don't do that because we have so many make work things happening in our lives. There are so many things to do, and there's so little chance to be. Again, getting back to the privilege of being a wedding photographer, you get to just be. You get to be a photographer at this wedding. So be a photographer at the wedding. There's no better excuse or better time to, quote unquote, live in the moment than there is when you're photographing a wedding. Like the whole point of photography is to capture moments that you can live in it, right? Like what hypocrites are we if we're not like actually settling in and like digesting the moments as they happen? So remember that. Shoot this wedding like it's your last wedding because for them, it is. It is their last wedding. It truly is. Now that I've been doing this for so long, I get many responses from my clients saying how happy they are that they have these images of their parents and their grandparents because that was the last time a photo was taken of them. I'm sure many of us have these stories, or like a kid passes away, or like a dog passes, like these. That's what photos are for. And if you're not in the moment, if you're not seeing these things through their eyes or with an open heart, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's also a really beautiful release and relief to think like, this is the last wedding. This is the last wedding I'll ever shoot. And that can drum up inspirations from wells that you didn't know existed. Sure, you may have a wedding the next weekend, but let's just pretend, just for today, that this is the last one. Because for them, it is. It really is. It's their last one. So, and they've hired you to be there. So shoot it like it is. What would that bring out in your work? What would it bring out if you shot that wedding 100% the whole time? I'd love to see it. It's a good reminder for myself as well. One of the other speakers, Mr. Tyler Workin, he was on just a couple of episodes ago. He's such a wonderful dude. He has also been around for a really long time. He's been doing this forever. He's been mentoring forever. He's been speaking forever. And so he wasn't sure what he was going to talk about, but he blew all of our socks off. And he talked about the longevity of photography and how, and this kind of plays back to what the Kafashes were saying about how, this is really for them as well. And there's longevity here that we have to acknowledge, we need to respect. And Tyler talked about that as well, like how making images that are not to impress others, rather as a way to discover yourself and the people that you're doing this for. And Tyler always talks about these are photos for people who don't exist yet. Photography is for posterity. And so again, if we're shooting this wedding like it's your last, if you are photographing for your clients and the people who love them, all of these things start to fall in one beautiful pure line of the gravity of the task that we have, while it also being like this really wonderful privilege that we get to do this for people, or that we're being trusted to do this. So thinking about as you're shooting that these are photos for people who don't exist yet. So how are the grandkids? How are the great grandkids? How are other nieces and nephews and friends who have yet to be? What are they going to see when they look at these photos? So if we're just shooting a million portraits of the couple and we're standing in the same place while we're the speeches, or we're only standing our usual height with the camera at our eye 10 feet away from the couple the whole day, like we're not really going to be seeing any dimensions. It's going to be very one-dimensional photography. And if you think of using your photos as a way to introduce your clients to people who don't exist yet, then that's a nice way to remember that we can look at this in a bunch of different ways. Near, far, low, high, with respect, with gravity, with honor, with also like a little bit of humor. Whatever these people are experiencing, it's our job to really settle into that and provide that for them. Not only them, but everyone else after them. Your photos are going to be around for a really long time. Ideally, they will be here for hundreds of years, right? We're looking at images from like decades and decades and generations ago, and that's how we know what happened. So, are the images that you're making showing us what truthfully happened? And what does it say about the people that you are photographing? The last one that I wanted to mention was, and I briefly mentioned One of the other speakers that was there was John Dolan. And John was I also interviewed John on this podcast. I think he's number 18. Like, he was way back in the beginning when I started. But John is such a wonderful speaker, and his canon is deep. So many words of wisdom, so many photographs to share from several generations now. And it's really cool to see his work because there's just so much history to it. And the way he shoots is quite timeless. The only way that you know how old this is from fashion, which is so neat, right? But one of the things that he said was that when people trust you, they're going to tell you the truth. And so one of the things that I see a lot of younger photographers doing is not allowing time for that trust. And part of this comes, I think, from we're encouraged to present ourselves as the expert. We are the expert. We know what's going on. We know what's best. And I think that's true to some extent, but I think that can come with an air of unapproachability. Whereas if you present yourself as someone that they can trust from a human perspective, sure, professional is exceptionally important, but because what we're doing is so intimate, sometimes that professionalism becomes standoffishness. And people are conditioned to respond to cameras in a certain way. They're conditioned to stop and acknowledge that the camera is there. And if we add the expert, or like this person's going to tell us what to do and this person knows what they want, that is going to change how people behave. That's a different type of trust than intimacy. That's like an authoritarian trust versus friend or family trust. You see what I'm saying? So when people trust you, they're going to tell you the truth. They're going to open themselves up to you. They're going to let you see their vulnerabilities, and they're going to let you photograph their rawest states. I don't think that happens with photographers who come off as the photographer, who come in with a harem of other photographers. You can tell the photographers who have intimacy not just with the couple, but with everyone at the wedding. There's a bunch of different ways to gain that trust. We will all go about it in a different way because we all have different personalities. But one of the ways that works for me is by talking with people, talking with everybody, putting the camera down, just talking. And earlier in my career, I was very diligent about using these people hired me for 8 hours. I am going to shoot the shit out of every hour. And that stopped me from developing relationships with my subjects, with my clients, because there's that photographer, she's running around with a camera strapped to her face. And I was making good work, but I wasn't creating intimate images. They weren't very raw. They were observational. They were at times quirky, they were funny, but they weren't super intimate. And now that I spend a lot more time just talking with people, I'll sit back and have some hors d'oeuvres, and I will sit down with folks. My photos are so much better. They're so much better because people trust. They trust me. They trust me as the photographer. They trust me as someone who is having fun with them, who is part of the circus rather than just there to shoot it. Drops of wisdom for you today. All of this is meant to just give you some stuff to chew on, and my encouragement would be for you to check out Doc Day and see if it feels right for you, because the environment is one of nurturing and thoughtfulness. So thank you for being here. If you love what you listen to, please leave me a review or feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and we can chat. Take care, my friends. Have a beautiful day.